Is it possible that some of the mythical events of the distant past are events of only hundreds of years ago? Is it possible that in many places in the world, even separated from each other, have suffered a flood of sediments that could wipe out an entire civilization? According to researchers, perhaps the cities we live in today are built directly on top of old world cities. Can we fathom that there was a great cataclysm that covered old world buildings, and we simply just started to build right on top of them? According to legend, a significant number of dirt layers were removed, and what we now recognize as the cities we live in emerged from underneath. It is understandable that this is not an official version that is recognized by all historians. But the main premise is that, could an entire civilization be submerged by a mudflood? A mudflood is the sudden movement of a large accumulation of sediment, the product of a terrestrial phenomenon such as a large earthquake or tidal wave. We can go back to the early 1800s to try and understand the possibilities. According to historical accounts, between December of 1811 and March of 1812, there were upwards of 2,000 earthquakes in the central Midwest United States. Could this have been an event that triggered a type of so-called mudflood in North America? Sediment is solid particles that are deposited at the bottom of bodies of water, such as lakes and rivers. Also, as a result of a sufficiently strong storm, from the valleys and mountains near bodies of water, large sediment slides can be produced, and this mud is capable of greatly altering the relief of the area where the flood occurred. Throughout history, in virtually every country in Europe and Asia, there have been records of large mudflows. Having said that, is it possible that the world we see today could be built directly on top of a previous society that we know nothing about? When talking about the Tartaria or Old World reset theory, one immediately talks about the mudflood. Researchers claim it was responsible for ending an empire, however. Is there more to the story? The main evidence, or allegations, are the large number of semi-sunken buildings throughout the world. It should be noted that, especially in Europe, however, countries like the United States can also find these buildings. These are several excavations which unearthed full buried floors of old buildings complete with doors and windows. There would be no reason to build doors and windows underground. How would it be possible for this much sediment to build up in only a century or so? What buried these buildings so quickly? The main characteristic of these buildings is that, in fact, it seems that one floor of them has been buried in the ground. In many, it is seen as if a half window peeked out from the street floor. These buildings, in general, usually have stairs that make you go up to the floor where you can walk. It would be the second floor of the building. Or, on the contrary, they can have stairs that go down until people walk on the floor, which is sunken. In 1984, some places would even have underground city tours. The depth of which these old world cities are buried is astounding in itself. What happened? Is there another reason these old cities are completely buried under us? Theorists of the old world affirm that the enemies of the previous civilization, being victorious and taking advantage of the calamity that occurred with the old empire, took all the old world technology they could find. It is noteworthy that many of the buried buildings were used as hidden floors, and even some researchers claim that these underground floors were rejoined by the use of roads, thus forming secret hidden underground cities throughout Europe. When analyzing the common patterns of the theory, some researchers emphasize that most of the buildings that we can observe semi-buried have Gothic architecture, are made with red brick. We can find examples of red brick buildings much further into history than previously thought. Is there alternative explanations? The explanation of the cultural layer proposes that, as a result of human activity, elements accumulate in the soil that end up increasing the level of the soil surface. These elements are soil itself, garbage and waste. Archaeological science estimates this accumulation to be around 5 centimeters every 100 years. How can this theory explain the full, multi-story floors of buildings being completely buried underground? Researchers suggest that if these buildings were truly built only 100 or 200 years ago, there to be much less of a sedimentary layer. It is not at all likely that the people who lived in this time noticed that their homes and buildings were sinking in rubbish and simply allowed it to go on for many years. If we remember that the version of the cultural layer increases about 5 centimeters every 100 years, it is impossible that so many buildings around the world have been completely covered in this way. How many thousands of years would it take for the cultural layer to engulf the first floor of a building, and why wouldn't anyone do anything about it? Alternatively, there is another possible explanation of settling. A building can, without a doubt, sink into the ground due to, for example, the violent vibration of the ground caused by an earthquake. There is evidence, too, that cities built in valleys and near rivers are prone to the fact that their soil is not the most apt to support the weight of the city itself indefinitely. In cities located in valleys, subsidence of more than 10 cm per year has been observed. This version, compared to the previous one, sounds more plausible. However, to prove the disappearance of the Old World Empire, an investigation of practically all the earthquakes that occurred in the late 1700s and mid-1800s has to be carried out, which is not impossible, although extremely complicated. The possibility is not ruled out that, in fact, buildings around the world that appear to have windows at ground level may have been intentionally built that way. Consider that it is a strange type of design that was not given much importance, and that was later replicated in the rest of the world. But considering some of the advanced architecture and planning involved in constructing these immense and marvelous buildings that stand the test of time, burying windows and doors would not make too much sense. Online researchers have discovered that there is evidence in a magazine of natural history article that something strange was happening geophysically with the Earth, at least as early as the mid-1700s, and continuing up until the publication of that article in 1834. The article talks about migratory animals getting lost, frequent severe weather events, the aurora borealis being visible at low latitudes, and a change in the winds and ocean currents, to mention a few. At one point, the seas were so unfavorable and perilous that ships were left stranded in foreign ports for at least 3 months before it was decided it was safe to resume cruising. Could this have had an impact on society at the time? Was this part of a larger, unknown cataclysm that we don't know about? Significant meteor showers and increased volcanism are also mentioned as occurring at this time. It was reported that one such shower, which was seen all along the American East Coast, dumped hundreds of thousands of fireballs from dusk until dawn. A geomagnetic anomaly may have been one of the more likely explanations for this phenomenon. Whatever it was, it caused havoc for a span of at least 100 years. While this isn't a definitive explanation of the mudflood theory, it could perhaps be something to consider. The mysteries of our world seem to grow wilder every year. Is there more to history than meets the eye? Stay tuned for more next time. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up icon. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notifications for new videos.